perhaps about from that perspective as a member of that platform where we joined in early 21. So just a little bit later than the actual setup of the platform and the launch of the platform. So we were looking forward to feeding into some of the issues that relate to policy implementation on very specific files from a local and an urban perspective in that platform. And I think the platform, it comprises all member states and a group of stakeholder organizations, and the Commission's Secretary General provides the secretariat function and offers really a great facilitation of the work and a huge support overall. And RECOP provides a solid contribution and deserves full credit for the work that contributes to the platform, or at least have done in 2021. And was sort of a big part of the productivity of the platform. It has been very useful to gain insights into the working of the Fit for Future platform and to better understand what is possible to do in terms of policy implementation and future fitting the EU on that platform. In principle, it appears to be a very good forum with many interests represented, different stakeholders in all member states, regions, so with RECOP as well, and it can be a very fruitful venue for debates that covers many different angles. But what the goals and challenges are for policy implementation, and what do we mean when we say better regulation and future fitting EU legislation? And there are many different understandings of these issues. So apart from the ongoing work on developing opinions that the platform is doing, so these opinions that are focused on the specific legislative acts that are up for revision by the European Commission. We've also had some very principled discussions on the platform that have been, and I wanted to share some insights into that, as they also show a little bit some of the challenges related to the platform. I think one of the biggest debates and one of the biggest challenges of the platform has been around the scope and the mandate of the platform and the added value of the work. We've discussed how to avoid overlaps with these general public consultation of stakeholders that the Commission is running when they're developing new policies, new legislation, and how to avoid overlap with formal negotiations in the legislative process, which of course is particularly important for the member states who are not keen on providing insights into their future positioning in negotiations. And at the same time, we still want to, while not doing that, still want to offer, produce meaningful reports on different topics and offer useful contributions to the further policy development process, and ensure that future policy developments are aligned with longer term goals, for example, of the European Green Deal, and offering that level of protection to environmental developments, for example. And on the platform, we've seen that some are in favor of a very strict focus of the work of the platform, so a fairly narrow mandate with a focus on delivering very clear recommendations on how to simplify EU rules and how to reduce burden in relation to implementation. On some files, this is a lot easier said than done for many stakeholders. And so some have also raised concerns about this very narrow interpretation of the role of the platform, of the mandate of the platform, which can also quickly tip into a deregulation agenda where on some areas we actually need more rules to adequately protect the environment and consumers, for example. And there is also an issue whether regulation is actually, whether we should see it as a burden. There is a big question about sort of burden reduction, but is regulation actually a burden, or is it about responsibilities, particularly in the environment area, responsibilities for safeguards for example, future generations. Another very principled debate has also been about the type of opinions that are drafted that we have discussed. They have been There's these the opinions that are very focused on legislative files that allows the platform to be productive, to set a work plan and to deliver. But it is a work that is less reflective and it allows for very sort of limited overall discussions, also due to, for now, what has been online working formats. So for this year, there will be one on the work program. We have agreed that there will be one opinion of a slightly broader nature of the twin digital and green transition, and looking at legislative synergies or legislative barriers that could be removed, that could be seen as obstacles to this digital and green transition. We've also had discussion. No, one of the working methods of the platform is a very strong focus and a push for unanimity when adopting the position to sort of underpin the credibility of the opinion. This is incredibly challenging. There's so many different interests at stakes and member states and stakeholders, and there's different types of stakeholders with very different interests come at this from a very different from very different perspectives on the different opinions. So it's also been a very challenging approach. And then there is also a big question mark over the actual impact of the opinions. It's a bit unclear how useful the opinions are for the Commission services, who are, however, in the loop and incredibly helpful throughout the process, I should say. But they also do a lot of consultations and impact assessment themselves. Of course, they must in the preparation. So the added value is maybe something to look at of these opinions, which are quite resource intensive to prepare. And there's one last thing that we've discussed in relation to the working formats, is it seems to be a format that suits member state representative. It's something that they're used to, where they have broader administrations, a bigger capacity to be able to contribute across a very broad range of files and topics with many different ministries to draw upon, which is extremely challenging for stakeholder organizations to comply with. So in conclusion, there seems to be still a lot of work ahead for the Fit for Future platform. It's perhaps not entirely sure, in my personal view, if it has found the right form and focus yet, although I think there are some very admirable efforts that's gone into improving what it's sort of building on. So the predecessor of the previous commission and the refit platform. But it's or maybe it's just a question that hasn't found its right name yet. Seems to be a mismatch between what the name indicates that it should be and what it really is in reality. So that the Fit for Future is a very ambitious label, and it could maybe be over-promising what the platform can actually deliver. But this were my comments for now on this Fit for Future platform. Thanks for the possibility to contribute. May I hand back to the moderator again?
For your presentation. And I mean, as we know from our experience, that the Fit for Future is some kinds of very difficult and secret procedure, and you really need experience to know exactly how this works and how you can get out of it the best outcome. I guess in this sense, we have some similar interest between RecHub and Eurocities, and I would like to invite you to get in contact with us to talk about similar interest in this whole. And I don't know if you want to stay or if there are comments or questions from our colleagues. I don't see any questions or comments. So again, thanks a lot. And I would now come to our next speaker. And she's from DG Move, from the Commission, Julie Bouy. I hope I pronounced her name correctly. As Markus already mentioned, she will tell us something about the Commission ideas on transport infrastructure. Julie, we sent you this report we did on infrastructure, but on a very short notice, and it was not possible to check our report properly, so that just for you colleagues in mind, but I guess this is a good starting point for a dialogue with DG Move on our findings, on our report, and but for today, I would give the floor now to you and for your presentation. Thanks a lot for being with us here.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon to everyone. So indeed, we received this report very short notice. So today I will present you, I will focus my presentation on the TNT revision, so the Trans-European Network of Transport Regulation. I will share my screen because I prepared a few slides. I know I have only 10 minutes, so but I will try to be straightforward. So I hope you can see my screen. Please confirm. Do you see my screen?
Yeah.
Can you confirm? Yes, perfect. So we decided to revise the TNT regulation, so the Trans-European Network of Transport Regulation that was adopted in 2013, so almost 10 years ago. And we decided to revise it because it's an opportunity to modernize the current framework, and more than all, to align it with the new priorities of the European Green Deal and the sustainable and smart mobility strategy. So as you know, the European Green Deal is very ambitious, calling for 90% reduction of greenhouse emission gas and zero pollution ambition. So that means also for transport a shift of 75% of inland freight carried today by road to be shifted to rail and inland waterways. The Sustainable and Smart Mobility Strategy is a communication that has been communicated by DG Move last year. And this is more or less the roadmap. It gives a kind of action plan with goal and ambitions to reach this objective of the Green Deal. So, for instance, we listed here some key steps. So, rail freight traffic should increase its market share by 50% by 2030 and double by 2050. Transport by inland waterways and short sea shipping should increase its market share by 25% by 2030 and 50% by 2050. Traffic on high-speed rail should double by 2030 and triple by 2050. And scheduled collective travel under 500 kilometers to be carbon neutral by 2030 within the EU, and at least 100 climate neutral cities in Europe by 2030. So that's the ambition and the steps that we want to reach within those deadlines. For the TNT, so the Trans-European Transport Network, what we are aiming at, so the 4 core objectives remain the same that in the current version of the regulation, meaning we want to focus on sustainability, on cohesion to connect EU cities and regions, including rural area and remote region. We want to focus on efficiency and on user benefits. But we want, in addition, amend the regulation to really focus on the zero emission transport and digitalization. We have evaluated the current version of the regulation, so the one adopted in 2013. So we clearly saw, based on this evaluation, that there is a lack of concrete target measure to ensure appropriate infrastructure that would meet the new political and societal challenges and objectives of the Green Deal. We saw also that there are some problems of delays for a limited number of projects on the TNT infrastructure project, usually caused by complex national procedure. We also saw that there is a need to reinforce the role of the EU coordinators on the core network corridors. We also would like to have faster deployment of low and zero emission transports and mobility on the TNT, and to better align also the new TNT with the future alternative fuels infrastructure regulation, which is also for the moment under negotiation. And we also consider that it was needed to improve the synergy between the different instruments that we have. So the TNT core network corridor that are really focusing on infrastructure, and for the rail freight corridor, with the rail freight corridors that are really focusing on the rail freight operations inside the EU. So the proposed revision will mainly propose a new network structure to meet our objectives. So we had the core network by 2030 and the global comprehensive network by 2050. And now we would like to add, we propose to add a new intermediary deadline by 2040. We also merge the European, we merged the previous core network corridor with the new, the previous rail freight corridor in the new European transport corridor. And we want also to better integrate the horizontal priorities that are the European rail traffic management system and the European maritime space. I provided here the map of the new proposed European transport corridor. And you can see that there are 9 corridors, so like in the past, but with some changes. Mainly, for instance, the North Sea Med has been merged with the Rhine-Alpine. And we have also reshufflements in the east, where we integrate the Balkan in the Orientist Med, that is now the Western Balkan. The Rhine-Danube has been adapted a little bit also, and we have included a new corridor here, which is the Baltic Black Aegean Seas. All in all, to better connect all the EU and all the regions. So as I mentioned, we have a new intermediate deadline. So it's a really gradual network completion in 3 steps. So 2030, focus on the core network, where we keep the completion of the core network with the standards that was defined already in 2013. For 2040, so the so-called extended core network, so we expect the completion of the extended core network based on the TNT standards, including the new standards that the revision of the regulation propose, both for the core and this extended core network, and a full deployment of the ERTMS on the extended core network, but also the comprehensive network. So this is what we aim with the proposal for this intermediate deadline, and then by 2050, the completion of the comprehensive network. We have different, of course, new requirements or adaptation of the requirement for each mode of transport, but I thought that for today, maybe you would have, 10 minutes is very short. So I did a focus really on the zoom on the urban roads. So the new proposal of regulation includes a wider number of urban nodes. So we have a very long list now of 424 proposed urban nodes, where we want really to improve the interconnection between local, regional, and international transport, and where we foresee a few obligations for each node. So for instance, to establish a sustainable and urban mobility plan by 2025, to report urban mobility data, to have at least 1 multimodal freight terminal per urban node, with at least 1 recharging station for heavy-duty vehicles, and to develop multimodal passenger hubs with at least 1 recharging station for buses. In terms of investment, so all these ambitions, of course, require a lot of investment needs, and also some EU funding to incentivize the investment needs. So here on this slide, I try to summarize the total investment needs. So based on the current TNT regulation, so the 2013, we expect that the needs are for the core network completion between 2021 and 2030, 500 billion euro. And for the comprehensive network, so which include the core network between the period 21-2050, we expect an investment need estimated at 1.5 trillion. So that means an average investment need of 50 billion per year on average. With the new measure that we propose in the revised TNT regulation, we would increase this annual investment need of an additional 16.4 billion. So it would be between the period 25-2050, an average 65, 66 billion euro per year. That represents a lot of budget and a lot of ambition. So we have also EU funding program that support transport. Of course, the funding program that I present today on this slide do not support only the TNT. There are also regional or rolling stock or other aspects of the TNT that are included in transport, but not so not only TNT. So here I listed the different programs that can support the different type of elements in transport. So manufacturing, infrastructure, fleets, or clean fuels. So the first one is the Recovery and Resilience Facility. Here I could say that more or less we can see today in the different national plan that some 90 billion euro would be dedicated to transport. Then we have the InvestEU, so it's a different instrument here. We are not talking about grants, we are talking about guarantee on financing. We have also the European Investment Bank that can provide support to those type of transport projects. Of course, here we are absolutely not with grants, it's a financing. Then we have the regional program, the European Regional Development Fund and the Cohesion Fund that can support both infrastructure, but also fleet in certain cases, like rolling stock and railroading stock. And it's not only focusing on transport network, TNT transport network, but can be also regional. So here we don't have a precise figure yet, of course, because the operational program are in negotiation with the member states for the moment. But we can see, if we would estimate, we could look at the past, and in the period 2014-2020, the total budget dedicated to transport under those programs were 70 billion. Then we have the Connecting Europe facility that is fully dedicated to support the TNT, where we have 25 billion euros. Then we have the Horizon Europe for the research, where we have for transport some 7 billion. And then we have the Innovation Fund, which is funded with the ETS system, so emission trading system. The next step for the TNT, the negotiation in the Council are ongoing since since January 2022 under the French presidency. Negotiation in the Parliament are about to start. And we expect the adoption of the new TNT regulation no later than mid-2023 to have sound legal basis for various funding and financing instruments. So voilà, that's it for my side. I will stop to share my screen, and thank you for your attention.
Thanks a lot, Julie, for this many informations and the insights and the outlook of what we can expect from the Commission. It's already, as you said, according to your timeline, under discussion. And again, I mean, this was an issue which we touched in our infrastructure report, and so you will find some findings which could be helpful for the Commission's work as well. So we would be happy if we could invite you to talk about our conclusions in our report in the weeks to come. So that, let's say, we would be happy to discuss it with you in this context. Thanks a lot again, and good wishes back to Brussels. I guess you are in Brussels from Alentejo, 30 degrees outside. I don't know how the weather is in Brussels, but
it's good.
So I would come now to our next speaker, and well, he is from DG Connect, and can tell us something about the interoperability strategy, one of our opinions in Fit for Future. And so I guess it was a lucky coincidence that you could follow already some of the speakers who were talking about Fit for Future, and you could get some insights from our RECAP network. So welcome Eddie Hartog here. I know that you are our colleagues from our Econ Secretariat. Anke and Marek have a good cooperation with you. So we know already a bit about your work from our colleagues. But without further ado, please, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much, and it's a pleasure to be with you in Alentejo. What I'll do is a couple of things. I mean, Marcos asked me to talk about interoperability, but he only told me last week. Normally, if I'm invited for interoperability, I ask a colleague to go, and I don't do that myself because you get into engineering stuff and stuff. But I'll mention interoperability in a broader context. I'll then come back to why we will only meet here and probably never meet again. That's why, thanks to Marcos, we actually have the opportunity to engage for once. But I will still give you an opportunity maybe to meet towards the end of the year on a topic. It's also related to interoperability. So that's a bit what I would like to do. First of all, interoperability. It's, as I said, it's not my favorite thing because it's often about standards and technical stuff, and I'm not an engineer. And strangely enough, it does resonate with citizens. You wouldn't expect that. But I was reading on the plane the results of the conference on the future of Europe. I think it's on, let me see, I noted it. On page 77, you find the European citizens in this conference emphasizing the need for interoperability. I said, wow. I thought that was only for bureaucrats and technicians, but it's important. They also mentioned that we need to avoid that we go into technology that has vendor lock-in. To be honest, when I started this job, I'd never heard of vendor lock-in, but our citizens said, let's avoid vendor lock-in. And those are two things that we discovered for the digital transformation at local level, that everyone does fantastic things, and then we have beautiful platforms and websites and seminars on exchange of good practices, but in the end, everyone does their own thing. Because they have different technology, and the one said, well, I'm too small, I just buy my Google stuff. Well, then there may be a vendor lock-in issue. I just do my own thing. So with a lot of projects, we came to the conclusion that they don't scale, and we don't really come to critical mass on what we do in the European Union. And if that is the problem, the first reaction of a good European civil servant, which as a consequence I'm not, is to say, but then I have to write a communication about interoperability and the digital transformation. No, that's the first thing. And then from that communication, I will propose 1, 2, 3 legislative proposals, which all will have 10 implementing or delegated acts. You know, and let's say it'll keep us busy, and it'll keep you busy. We decided not to do it. When I say we, it's not me as the European Commission or my team. It was actually with people like Dorte that you've just met, with people like Martin Brunsko that you will probably meet. I think he's just arrived, but you will meet him tonight and tomorrow. People, he represents the organization of Agile and Smart Cities, and people, and the European Network of Living Labs. We said, like, what do we really want to do with all of this? Is it really legislation? Because, you know, then yes, we will be interoperable in 10, 20, 30 years when basically it's too late to actually act because technology goes so fast. That's what I was interested, Rafael, that you said is now in the wrap up. Yeah, but you know, we want to be more political, and that's precisely the conclusion we came to. On the one hand, you need those technicians in the projects to sit down and write the standards and look at all that sort of stuff that is technical, pilot it and then scale it, etc. But at the same time, you need a local mayor to say, I would like to do it in a certain way, and will instruct the staff to do that. And apart from that, also instruct the mobility civil service and the energy civil service and the water civil service and the citizens engagement civil service and the street furniture civil service to actually work together when they use technology, which is also another thing. So we came to the conclusion that we need to set up a movement, so not work from projects into clustering and then we get a collective view of what it's like. But we need to create a movement of all the 86,000 municipalities in the European Union that do the same thing. Now, my KPI is not 86,000, but we've said, well, we need to, if you want to get critical mass, 2/3 of the European Union needs to be on the same wavelength. So you need to have 420 million, we have 420 million citizens, so 300 of them should be living in a municipality that follows this living in .eu movement. That was the name that was invented. And there's many things of interoperability that came across. Now, I will focus on the technical part, but some of you might have seen the report proposal for a European interoperability framework for smart cities and communities. I come back to that, which was drafted under the auspices of the colleagues from Digit. That actually says it's not only about technical interoperability, it's also cultural, legal, and all those sort of things that we need to look at. So we said, well, with those problems, what do? We need to create that movement. That movement has principles, and that movement has work streams. I will spare you all the details because it would be too long. But one of those work streams is precisely about technical interoperability. Interoperability framework, what do we call it? A standards rolling work program. And that's the immediate reflex that I got with the colleagues. And yes, I can do that. I can write a piece of legislation that says from 2028, all municipalities, all regions will use FIWARE standards. Quali linea finished, and that's the only standard that we will use in the European Union. The only problem is that not everyone uses FIWARE. And actually, FIWARE is part of a much bigger family of standards that are least open and interoperable. So we came up with this concept, and again, it's not me, it's our technicians. They came up with this concept of minimum interoperability mechanisms. What's the minimum you really need to have to become interoperable? That you have data portability, that you can actually read each other's formats, etc. So that's a concept that is now being developed by the Organization of Agile and Smart Cities, that then in the end needs to lead to a set of standards that you can use. And we try to develop, for example, for data spaces, blueprints of what would that look like if you translate that into procurement. If you're a mayor, you say to your people, I would like to do it the way the European Union does it. What sort of standards do you then? So you get a blueprint of standards that you could use in different formats. You can still use different services. We focus very much on the local digital twin as a visible output from which you can do many things. And we have a very good project, Duet, that actually worked in the Flanders region. They bring all of them together. And that is where why we don't meet, because we decided not to do legislation. Yes, we did look at the second instrument the European Union had, which is money, and I'll come back to that. The toolbox and the blueprint come from the Digital Europe program. And we actually said, let's not look at the small money that the Commission owns, but let's look at the big money, the cohesion policy and the RF. So we try to convince your member states to put a lot of money in the digital transformation at local level with, let's say, mitigated success. Went to all sorts of other projects, but not that. But the investment is in your areas. And what did we discover? A lot of the cities, and Alentejo is one of them, said like, well, a mayor, and one of my members is a mayor in Dingolstadt in Germany, 6,000 inhabitants. You can imagine they do not have a 40 people service looking with a chief technology officer that can do all these things. They need to find a collective way of doing that. And you often find if you do that together as 30, 40 municipalities together, you get traction also in the market. It makes it relevant, and you don't have to spend so many human resources. 30, 40 municipalities, hey, that's a region. And that is why also we work very closely with Marcos and the Aurora project to say, well, maybe in rural regions you need that collectivization, but even in the bigger cities, they look at metropoles. They don't look at themselves. Why don't you extend it by 40 kilometers? So it's really that collectivization of the procurement and how you do this together that we work on. So we had this minimum interoperability mechanisms. I think two things are maybe relevant, and then I will stop there. One is that some of you will know that the European Union also has, through Digit, done IDA and European Interoperability Framework and that sort of stuff. And now in the work program, you actually find, and that is where we might meet, there is the Interoperable Europe Act. that the colleagues from Digit are now drafting, and they've asked us to help. And we said, well, what we try to push with their consent, we have a very close and very constructive cooperation. So like, yeah, the problem with legislation is the European Union doesn't know you. We only work with member states. So the Commission talks to the member state talks to the region, and the region talks to the cities. And if you then ask any chief technology officer of a city, have you ever spoken to the chief technology of your country? Most of them say, I don't even know who it is. So the interoperability doesn't work top down. So we said, well, why in an Interoperability Act do you not bring in the design phase, in the outset, for all the solutions that you find, regions and cities? So that is where we might meet, and I would count on your support when you look at that element. My last point then is, what do we do as a European Commission, also as a team? If you look at vendor lock-in, if you look at domination and interoperability, if you look at standard setting internationally, you often find that we have enormously clever people, but collectively we're not very clever. Because in the discussions at very technical level, you find companies, to say the least, that are not European. You find a lot of people running around in these study groups and technical groups and whatever you name it, that are not, let's say, from the European Union or from like-minded countries. At the senior management level, when it comes to I used to be head of the international unit. When you go to the International Telecoms Union, you find member states completely disparate. Now, we try to coordinate, but often we would vote 13 one way and the other said the other way. And, you know, so there's no coherence. So what we try to do is also to engage at United Nations level in the International Telecoms Union, but also with the United Nations Habitat to actually say, we need to do this together in a way that keeps the autonomy of a region, of a city. And it resonates with quite a few, actually, particularly in Japan, Korea. The movement that I just described, Living in .eu, I think is the only one that is mentioned in the UN Habitat quarterly report recently. They're saying that's a good example of not being parochial or imperialistic, but by creating an environment where everyone can feed in and where everyone can work on that interoperability together, having in mind that we would like all players in the market to have a piece of the cake. And we would like to have in mind that the municipalities that go through this digital transformation actually can do that in a human resources and money efficient manner by not always reinventing the wheel. And that is really what we're trying to do. So there's points that will not liaise with what you've just said, because we don't put legislation forward, so that means you won't see it. It won't be in a work program. But it's really what I call the convening power of the Commission with the organizations that we have. We don't own it. Even the domain name living in .eu. I mean, I had a discussion with my colleagues that do the visualization. They said, oh, but it's not compatible with the Commission instructions. I said, yeah, well, I don't own it, so it's not compatible. So what's the problem? And I was very pleased to come back to the Committee of the Regions to say, like, we need to do this together. Not only together with the Committee of the Regions, otherwise you get what I could call jealousy effects, like, oh, but wait a minute, we do regions, you don't. Also, member states and regions and municipalities need to work together. Again, the bureaucratic term is multi-level governance, but we say don't do this now behind the back of a member state, but do it together with a member state. So we brought it into the urban agenda and all that sort of thing. And that is what we're really trying to do on this interoperability, to create a culture of joining and sharing. So sharing the information that we have and saying, now this is the way we would like to bring this together, and joining by saying, well, actually, then we're also going to use what we just have invented together. Because that's often the problem. That's the scaling. Often we invent a lot of things together, but then we all use different things, or we reinvent it. And that is what the Living in .eu movement is trying to do, which I think is very complementary with what you're trying to do as well, in having the voice of regions heard at, let's say, policy level, whether that's legislation and otherwise. And I'm very pleased with the cooperation that we have had with many of you. If you speak to your political bosses, when you go home, ask them to actually sign that declaration. that they committed to it. One of the leaders is Alentejo in this respect, who signed the declaration, but then also in Hessen, there's a digital minister that said like, no, that's precisely what I would like to do, and make it a leading week. Now, Marcus and I sometimes have the discussions of, you know, regions or municipalities. I want to be the leader in the EU or even in the world of X, Y, Z. Said, yeah, great. So you're number 65 in the queue. Join up, because I've already spoken to people who want to lead. Now, the fact that you have co-opetition is fine, that you compete and then cooperate. But much more important from being the leader is that you are joining the team. And then you can be a leader together rather than do it individually. So I'd like to leave it at that, but I'm around, so it's easy to come and talk to me and see what is needed for you to join the movement. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Eddie. That was a kind of perfect presentation, not only from the content side and from the way you presented it, and you were perfectly in time as well. Because as I said in the beginning, we have another appointment at 5 o'clock, a guided tour through the building. Well, we have a bit to hurry up, but before we hurry up, maybe you want to ask a question to our speaker or to make a comment on this. But I guess I mean, we take this as the beginning of a good cooperation and conversation on this issue, because as you know, we are starting to do a consultation on the interoperability issue. So maybe we come back to you when we have a bit advanced our work on this. But so far, thanks again, and I hope you can join us tonight for dinner. So you deserved your dinner with your speech. Thank you very much. And we have to hurry up to the reception, yeah? Okay, so see you.